Okay, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to all our members and welcome to all our guests. Welcome to the Royal United Services Institute for Defence and Security Studies New South Wales monthly lecture. And I extend a special warm welcome to today's speaker, Major General Matt Burr, Commander of the 2nd Australian Division, and to the members of his staff, and including Warrant Class 1 Virginia Morris, the Division RSM. Welcome. Now, I'm particularly delighted to have Major General Burr with us today. Major General Burr, for many years a member of RUSI Victoria, assumed command of the 2nd Australian Division on 7 December 2024 and shortly thereafter accepted our invitation to become a Vice Patron of RUSI New South Wales. Since that time, he has attended a number of our events, and we truly appreciate his valued support, no less today as our lunchtime speaker. Major General Burr enlisted in the Australian Army as an apprentice in 1986 and in 1993 graduated from the Royal Military College at Duntroon. He has held command appointments as Squadron Commander of the 108th Signal Squadron, Commanding Officer of 5th 6th Battalion Royal Victoria Regiment, and Commander of the Australian contingent for Exercise Suman Protector in Malaysia. Major General Burr has served in staff appointments within the Directorate of Reserve Officer Career Management and as Acting Director General of Reserves, and has also been a senior instructor in multiple roles, including at Melbourne University Regiment and the Royal Military College. His senior leadership roles have included appointments as the Deputy Commander of 2nd Australian Division, Commander of 4th Brigade, and Joint Task Force Commander of Operation Bushfire Assist, Operation COVID-19 Assist and Operation Flood Assist 2022. And it was in recognition of his leadership in these operational appointments that Major General Burr was appointed a member of the Order of Australia. Major General Burr deployed on Operation Tanager in 2000 as part of the United Nations Military Observer Headquarters in Timor-Leste, and in 2015 deployed on Operation High Road Resolute Support as the Chief of International Engagement in the Afghanistan government ministries within NATO headquarters. Now, in his civilian career, Major General Burr is a Fire Rescue Victoria officer. In 2009, he deployed to Victoria's Black Sunday operations and was part of the Australian government's response to the Christchurch earthquakes in 2011, where he was awarded a New Zealand Fire Service citation. And with such strong affiliations south of the border, it's not surprisingly that he's also a keen follower of Australian rules football. Sir, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the podium.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks very much for those warm words, Kim. And I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we meet, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge those Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders who have served or are currently serving as members of the Australian Defence Force, in particular those members of the Regional Force Surveillance Group and the broader 2nd Division. I think before I start, I might take the opportunity to play a video. Members of the Royal United Services Institute of New South Wales, guests and colleagues, I thank you for the opportunity to address you today on the actions of the 2nd Australian Division and what our functional command is doing to meet the tasks allocated to it by the National Defence Strategy, or the NDS. Before I start, let me say that it always feels like a real sense of occasion coming here to RUSI headquarters located in the magnificent Hyde Park, and I'm always impressed by the fantastic reading room that RUSI members may avail themselves of. More importantly, I wish to acknowledge the long-standing commitment and interest taken by RUSI New South Wales members on defence matters, and in particular the experience of the Australian citizen soldier. I've couched my speech today and the intent of the Division in 2026 as that of maintaining momentum. Since the release of the National Defence, since the release of the Defence Strategic Review in 2023 and the subsequent National Defence Strategy in 2024, the Division, like the wider Army, has moved at pace to ensure that it can execute the responsibilities entrusted to it. This has required a period of rapid assessment and analysis, resulting in various structural changes in the size and capability of the Division's headquarters and its units. Such an assessment will no doubt be ongoing and require us to continually adapt. That being said, I feel it's safe to say that we've reached a point where we have conducted our bolt adjust in terms of culture, expectations, training, force structures and force modernisation. Now, with the impending evolution of the National Defence Strategy in 2026, I seek to build upon the foundations laid over the past few years by maintaining momentum and sharpening the preparedness of the Division for its theatre mission, which is to defend Australia. So let's take a quick step back if I could. The NDS has made it clear that in the current strategic circumstances, the ADF must be able to defend Australia and our immediate region, and deter through denial any adversary's attempt to project power against Australia through our northern approaches. The NDS states that the ADF will achieve this by transitioning from a balanced force to an integrated and focused force. Integration describes how the 2nd Australian Division, the Army and the wider ADF can only be successful when it's employed as a component of the whole of government and the whole of nation effort. In this case, whole of nation means harnessing the contributions of industry and academia as well. Together, this integrated force is to develop and sustain those critical capabilities to hold a potential aggressor at risk. The NDS refers to this as impactful projection. To deliver on this impactful projection, the ADF and wider defence organisation must deliver 6 key capability effects. We must project force, hold a potential adversary at risk, protect ADF forces and supporting critical infrastructure here in Australia, sustain protracted combat operations, and maintain persistent situational awareness and achieve decision advantage. To meet the aspirations set by the NDS, our division must be able to deliver on all of these capability effects. Many of these capability effects require a forward posture in the northern regions of Australia. Some of these capabilities, such as the integrated air and missile defence, may not reside in the Army, but the Army, and more pertinently, the 2nd Division, will have a role in protecting and enabling these capabilities. The NDS directs that to become an integrated force, the ADF must also move from being a balanced force to a focused force. In short, the ADF must be trained, structured, equipped to operate in the new strategic conditions, which includes the recognition that older orthodoxies about warning times must be abandoned. For our division, we cannot operate as a partially staffed skeleton force that can be fleshed out with necessary lead times. Instead, the Army and the 2nd Division must be a contingency force that can scale and surge. The Australian Army's contribution to the National Defence Strategy is explicit in its guidance to the 2nd Division. It says part-time security and response brigades are located throughout Australia. These forces support civilian authorities with homeland security, including the Northern Base Network and other critical infrastructure. They also form an expansion base and follow-on forces for the wider Army. Therefore, the NDS gives the Division a clearly defined task. It must be able to force generate, deploy, and then sustain a tranche of security and response units to defend key areas in Australia's north, whilst concurrently maintaining other force elements for directed contingencies. It must be able to do so with minimal warning time, if any. It must be able to fight tonight. Units training and readiness standards must be good to go, or perhaps, in extremis, good enough to deploy anywhere in Australia. It must be able to operate within the context of national defence by integrating with whole of government partners. It must ensure that its headquarters at all levels has the ability to maintain habitual relationships and quickly develop new ones with other government agencies and entities. Lastly, the Division must be able to support other forces such as the 1st Australian Division, as well as the Royal Australian Navy, the Royal Australian Air Force and other allies. Conversely, the 2nd Division must be positioned to leverage key effects provided by other forces such as Special Operations and the Logistics and Aviation Brigades. So let me unpack what this means for our Division. We've received explicit guidance that we must conduct domestic security and response operations. But what are these? These will be joint, even if the land component is the lead contributor. They will also be interagency in nature, requiring integration or the ability to operate with other state and federal entities, most notably state and federal law enforcement. The Division's role is to defend Australia, including its offshore territories, integrated with the whole of government in accordance with the Chief of Joint Operations Theatre Campaign Plan. Consider those words carefully. The 2nd Division is Army's functional command that is tasked with the most existential and important theatre mission, to defend Australia. The criticality of this mission cannot be overstated. We therefore must be ready to defend Australia and all that this entails. This may require the Division to deploy offshore to defend isolated Australian territories, to defend critical infrastructure and facility, theatre assets and support civil authorities. By defending Australia, the rear hard shoulder of the NDS's primary area of military interest, we will contribute to any wider expeditionary fight by enabling strategic and operational force projection beyond mainland Australia. The conduct of these operations will be undertaken by the Division's operational entity, Joint Task Force 629 or JDF 629, which has carriage of all domestic operations. The Division is the raised, trained, sustained functional command that is entrusted with the land component's contribution to homeland defence. In this guise, the Division, and therefore myself, reports to the Chief of the Army. The Chief of the Army, via his executive documents, the Army Plan and the Army Order, directs me to achieve certain training levels and prepare forces to undertake domestic operations. These forces include the Emergency Support Forces, or ESFs, to undertake defence assistance to the civil community, or DAC. It is the ESFs that you see assisting state authorities during fires and floods. Secondly, the Division must also generate several force elements that support defence aid to the civil authority, or DFACA. DAC and DFACA are long-standing within the Division, well-established tasks that we've trained extensively for in the past. Perhaps what this audience today is most interested in is the NDS-directed task of security and response, or SecRes operations. Since the NDS, our understanding of SecRes operations has developed rapidly, but as I actually said in my opening remarks, this understanding is iterative and adapts based on threat and assessments after major exercises. I'll expand on what we mean by what constitutes SecRes operations shortly, but first I must make clear that this is an operational rather than a force generation task. If the division is activated to undertake SecRes operations, it will do so as a part of JDF 629, just as it does when it undertakes DAC or DFACA tasks. As it is on operations, JDF 629 reports to Joint Operations Command. Therefore, we would see during the conduct of SecRes operation, the division and JDF 629 would coexist simultaneously. The division within the training ecosystem of Army would continue to generate forces while also fulfilling responsibility for domestic operations. It delivers forces. JDF 629 under JOC is the employer of these generated forces. The dual requirement for an operational and a force generation headquarters is mirrored at the state-based brigade level. The division's subordinate brigades, the 11th Brigade in Queensland, the 5th Brigade here in New South Wales, the 4th Brigade in Victoria and Tasmania, the 9th Brigade in South Australia, and the 13th Brigade in Western Australia are raised, train and sustain entities. When activated, they become Joint Task Groups, or JTGs, under JDF 629, but with a portion of the brigade maintained as a parallel raised, train, sustain entity. Sitting beneath these JTGs are several SecRes task units. Currently, these are combined arms battalion-sized entities that are force generated from within all units within a particular brigade. We would see these SecRes task units as responsible for an area of responsibility within a JTG's area of operations. How the SecRes task unit apportions its subordinate elements would be at the direction of the SecRes task unit's CO. Depending on the operational context, JDF 629 may allocate brigaded assets in support of a particular JTG or a particular SecRes task unit. So what about the Regional Force Surveillance Group that I touched on earlier? The RFSG, comprising of 51 Far North Queensland Regiment, the Pilbara Regiment and North Force, are slightly different insofar that they're always on operations as part of extant and ongoing border protection operations. These operations would continue when JDF 629 is deployed and would, in effect, act as a deep screen for JDF 629 national operations. The operating environment for national security and response operations is characterised by a complex interplay of factors that demand a comprehensive and graduated approach. Safeguarding Australian critical assets and infrastructure will support domestic security, but also offshore military power projection. The modern threat demands that security and response operations consider more than the traditional threat and adversary vectors. To do so require deeper partnerships with industry and government agencies to enhance the resilience against potential asymmetrical disruptions across multiple domains. Australia's vast geography also necessitates joint force enablers and capabilities that can project and sustain forces over extended lines of communication. Our force elements must possess the readiness requirements capable of covering expansive distances while maintaining a persistent presence to deter and respond to the threats. Additionally, domestic interagency partnerships are critical for addressing the complexities within the operating environment. Collaboration with law enforcement, border security agencies and the emergency response organisations is vital for effective crisis management. Relationships between interagency partners must be robust and well rehearsed. Ultimately, intelligence sharing amongst domestic and international partners is integral to understanding and countering evolving threats. So let me turn back to the security and response, or SecRes, operations. At its most simple, we may characterise SecRes operations as comprising three operational dimensions. These are surveillance and reconnaissance, detect, defence, guarding, screening of assets, infrastructure and the population, protect, and interception of threat actors, respond. JTG units, including RFSG units, are structured to balance the achievement of all three operational dimensions. The JTGs are capable of operating in a variety of locations through Australia and its offshore territories. Once they are force generated, JTGs and their subordinate units are at a high state of preparedness and may be required to be dispersed to cover approaches to key assets, critical infrastructure and population centres. They are capable of conducting protection and response operations when required. Each JTG must be able to deal with a variety of threat vectors, from awful but lawful protests and nuisance operations, surveillance and base overflight, through to sabotage and/or attacks. Whatever the vector, such operations will be conducted in a contested information environment. In this context, we foresee that a portion of the domestic security and response operations will entail a visible presence patrolling to contribute to the wider whole of government's population's resilience building actions. Security and response operations will involve detection, identification and response to threats. To provide such effects within an interagency and joint security system, a layered approach is adopted. I want to hark back to the second key document that I referenced, namely the Australian Army's contribution to National Defence Strategy. This document, which I commend to you, highlights that land power offers 5 unique characteristics to the joint force. These are presence, persistence, asymmetry, versatility and value. The 2nd Division and JDF 629 will employ these characteristics during the conduct of security and response operations. Let me deal with these each in turn. Presence. The 2nd Division is of and from the community. We are citizen soldiers who live and work in the community, and it is the community which provides new soldiers to the division and supports those soldiers that are already serving. In many parts of Australia, particularly in regional and remote locations across Australia, we are the face of the Australian Army and the broader Australian Defence Force. We must ensure that the 2nd Division's structure and footprint strengthens this symbiotic relationship with the Australian people. Upon activation, I would see the trust created with society as absolutely key. Indeed, the Australian people may be one of our key sensors in detecting potential threats in an operational sense. But to maintain this presence, we must maintain our social licence with the society that we serve. In 2026, an understanding of how we create, sustain and improve upon this trust remains one of my key focus areas. Persistence. We're likely to deploy over widely dispersed areas and required to operate independently through the establishment of tactical areas of responsibility, which will include one or more focal areas within those areas of responsibility. Land forces in security and response operations must therefore seek to generate appropriate combat mass, achieve and maintain decision superiority, and apply technical mastery. The core concept for land force security and response operations proposes regionally orientated JTGs to conduct detection, protection and response operations against a variety of threats. Other government agencies, national technical means or ADF assets may in fact undertake the detection and identification of threats. As such, if the JTG itself doesn't detect the threat, other external surveillance intelligence gathering entities may cue and direct the JTG to respond to such threats. JTG operations will be characterised by close cooperation and coordination between detection, protection and response forces, in addition to other state and federal government agencies. Not only may the other government agencies assist in the detecting, but they may also act as the response force cued to an incident area by the actual JTG. The combination of physical presence, sensor and cueing, and the ability to respond enables true persistence in SecRes operations. Asymmetry. I can see that the term asymmetry is bandied around a lot these days, but from my perspective, it's very simple. Asymmetry as it relates to our national security and response operations boils down to this basic question. How does our division ensure that we maintain and exploit our home ground advantage? Dispersion will be a dominant factor shaping land operations to defeat any threats throughout Australia. An examination of geography of Northern Australia and an adversary's deployment capabilities suggests that the key characteristics of dispersed operations for ADF land forces include concurrency, economy of effort, flexibility, speed to response and risk. To minimise the difficulties inherent in dispersed operations, it will be necessary for the 2nd Division to take advantage of developing technology in the areas of command and control, mobility, firepower, including protective counter-UAS measures, communications, surveillance, survivability, and integrated air and missile defence systems. These are focal areas for the Division's force modernisation efforts and our continual adaptation within the 2nd Division. Versatility. Our soldiers can, and they must, adapt quickly between different operational roles employed across the spectrum of conflict, from disaster response to warfighting. I've stated that homeland defence is a holistic concept, and contributing to resilience is a task that's every bit as essential as protecting assets. In this regard, the 2nd Division has a wealth of recent experience in conducting operations in support of partner agencies, including the 1920 bushfires, through to COVID, and recently the floods in Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia and Western Australia. Not only did this practice the Division in generating forces quickly, it also allowed us to develop deep and continuing relationships with other government agencies and emergency service organisations while rapidly deployed across a variety of tasks across the country. The versatility of our soldiers is key to our success in domestic operations. The 2nd Australian Division, like the wider Army, prioritises human skills such as the ability to influence, build trusted relationships, and to understand the operating environment. These human skills allow us to do more with less. Indeed, if we ensure that the Division is integrated and partnered within Army, the other domains and across government agencies, the Division is able to achieve an enhanced effect. As the Army's Homeland Defence unit of action, we must be able to work within a broad spectrum of whole of government agencies, as well as leveraging the national support base and latent resilience within industry to enable integrated manoeuvre through and from Northern Australia. The Division's commanders and staff devote substantial effort in maintaining the relationships that allows the standing JDF 629, the 2nd Division's operational construct, to function in a joint and interagency setting. I'm just going to pause here at this point to reflect on how far the Division has come in the last 10 years and acknowledge the work of my predecessors in facilitating this change. One of the key cultural changes was increasing the readiness of the 2nd Division and highlighting the need for the Division to demonstrate that it could generate and equip employable and deployable forces by itself. And whilst he's not here today, Major General Paul Irving, one of the previous commanders of the division, absolutely was a part of this equipping and demonstration through the division's contingency forces that it deployed throughout regional stability operations during his tenure. Also, the initiative of Major General Porter, the Reinforcing Battle Group, cemented the operational focus force generation mindset within the brigades of the 2nd Division. We will continue to leverage this mindset for the current task at hand. Major General Kath Campbell then established the 2nd Division as the Australian Government's unit of action for domestic operations, normalising the deployment of the division's soldiers in SecRes tasks. Likewise, my immediate predecessor, Major General Tomei, emphasised that foundation warfighting is the division's centre line. This is really important for 2 reasons for the division. The first is that domestic security and response operation is not some type of lesser operation. The skills, knowledge and expertise garnered through foundation warfighting allow the division to generate security and response forces, but they also allow us to respond to DAC tasks off the line of march. The versatility of the division that I spoke to earlier, indeed I would suggest that the emotional intelligence and ethical decision making required to navigate the delicate context of domestic operations requires a professional mastery of the highest order. Secondly, the NDS has also determined that in addition to domestic operations, the 2nd Australian Division must be prepared to be a basis of expansion. I don't want to go into this in this forum, but needless to say that when we contribute to mobilisation, including reinforcing the Army's other unit of action, the 1st Australian Division, we must be well versed in foundation warfighting and combat operations. My most important task, my command accountability, is training our women and men for the task of greatest consequence that they will face. It is preparing our soldiers for war. In my opening remarks, I described 2026 as a year of maintaining momentum for the 2nd Australian Division. I hope my remarks today have illustrated just how strong this momentum has been and how the division has adapted over the last decade. The 2nd Australian Division, like the rest of Army, is continually adapting and having real expectations of it. These expectations has positioned the 2nd Australian Division's soldiers, NCOs and officers at the centre of Defence's planning for operational tasking. The Division understands the very clear role that the National Defence Strategy has entrusted to it. The Division has clarity of purpose, which provides our soldiers with excellent opportunity for service, and the Division and all of our people remain committed to the defence of Australia. Thank you.
Sir, on behalf of the Institute, thank you very much for a very enlightening presentation on the 2nd Division. For those of us who, over the years, served in the Division and on the headquarters, and what was seeing what was in our time, mainly theory, come in terms of real-time tasks. So again, sir, thank you. We have a presentation of our RUSI tie and badge, and also there's a presentation there from Mrs. Burr.
Oh, very grateful, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you.